Yay, it seems like we're all here. I really want to thank Flavio and Natalia and Brian. Those videos were just absolutely amazing. I had while I was watching them, I never really thought of either big team or open science the way that the way that each one of you presented it, and it was great. I saw Brian's first, and then I was like, oh my God, that's so exciting. Like, how do we get people excited? How do we get more? And as Brian was saying, like, I'm very excitable, so I'm already here and I'm already like, yes, let's do this. Let's get it moving. But it's very interesting on how do we like keep on pushing for the rest of the people. So that's very exciting. And then I saw Natalia's, and I was like, yeah, this is about like including everybody, and this is about making like not only opening for science, but also like for the people. It needs to be for the people. And then I saw Flavio, and then I just like I just went all crazy. I'm like, yes, preach, let's do this. So I'm super excited, and if there's any questions that anybody has right now, I would love to hear them. If not, I have a few that I would like to share. And there's a student here that had a question for all three of you that he asked me to share it. So I would like everybody else to ask. We have questions both. We can do them through here, through Zoom, and I think we have YouTube live as well, so people can ask questions through there too. And so I'd like to open it to the public if people have questions. I guess I can go ahead and start. It's Mexico. So right now, like we just started hearing these like super loud drums. There's like a party out there. I don't know what's going on, but it's really really cool. I'd like to start with asking a question to Brian. I thought, as I was saying, I thought it was a very interesting talk. It gave me like a whole new perspective on how you think about open science and how we can see it and how we can get people started and excited and like actually implement a lot of these things. And I think after watching Natalia's and after watching Flavio's, more my question is, and I guess the question's for everybody. It seems like there's a system on how getting people involved in the global north. Like there's already like something implemented of like, okay, you go to university and then your professor there kind of shows you how to like do things, and then you kind of continue on. And there's just like another level of inclusion for diversity, even in the global north, but more so in the global south. So like, how would you see we increase interest not only in adopting big team science, but also convincing people from the global north that it's within their interest to increase representation? It's not just about, I like how you framed it in the sense of like, how do we get people motivated and how do we make it rewarding, I guess, for people in the global north to include people from the global south? And I know it's a huge question, so if anybody can jump in.
Sure, I'm happy to take a first response, and we'll be quite interested in what Flavio and Natalia and anybody else has to say about this, because it is one of the fundamental challenges that I think came up thematically in all of these presentations, and more generally, all of the issues related to open science is how do you embody and live the spirit of inclusion and the potential that inclusion has to catalyze the strengths that exist more disparately across humanity than is currently incentivized, rewarded, and resourced to be part of the scientific community and process. So there isn't an easy answer, as you anticipate, to any of this. One of the areas that I spend a lot of time thinking about is on the very mundane elements of project management and implementation science. That, yes, of course, we need to work on people valuing and wanting to have more engagement, wanting to be inclusive. But there is a substantial portion of the psychology community, the scientific community writ large, that does have that existing value and motivation set. But what is not present are the workflows, the capacity, the support structures, all of the things that just make it pragmatically possible to translate good intention into productive and sustainable action. So one of the things that I think is a real strength of the big team science movement that we should continue to capitalize on is some core understanding of the need for good project management. So projects like FORT, like Psych Science Accelerator, like Many Babies, there is substantial investment in how do we organize ourselves? How do we create a governance structure? How do we do outreach? How do we create pathways so that people understand what they're getting involved in, how they can get involved, how they can increase their involvement and enhance their skills as they go from one step to the next. And that kind of planning and organization, and not necessarily centralized, but coordinated work to give those pathways, to make them meaningful, and to conduct then the explicit outreach and pulling in people to say these are opportunities if you're interested to take advantage of. I think that is like on the ground central to getting ideals into practice. So I'll pause there. I'm sure Flavio and Natalia have other things to add there.
Natalia?
I have a huge respect for Brian's work and for Flavio's work as well. And if this is something that I'm really not good at, it's at management. And I can act, I think a lot of people that I know in the places that I work will relate to that. So I think part of me thinks that I think I say that in my talk. Management training is one of the things that we should focus on to make big team science work in the global south, if we choose to use that term, or in underrepresented communities. But I'm not sure if it's only that issue, but I think it would help a lot. But I agree with Brian in that I would like to say I just realized that actually that I kind of, if those who watched my talk, I was not roasting the innovation model that Brian actually sits in his talk. It was a metaphor that I used that I agree with the innovation curve model, but the thing with the curve, that when we speak about making things easier for people to adopt things, is that curve is a way steeper for people in some places. And I've been making this point in a lot of places that I go, and this is one of the things that we chose to do from the beginning in ABRIR is, for example, the language barrier is something that we they don't realize how hard it is for people. And just to illustrate, I was in another meeting earlier today, international one, and I have colleagues from Brazil in this meeting, and it's way harder for them to deal with little issues, small issues in sessions, because they have to think in Portuguese while having to deal with issues in English in an international meeting. And for the other colleagues, it's very easy to navigate that. And it's an online session. So it's the same I'm doing right now, for example. We improvise, but they don't have the same experience that I have with doing that. So they fret, and then they can't express themselves, and then they can't think and they have to present the ideas and argue in another language. And this is really, really hard to do when you don't have a lot of experience in doing that with another language in a professional career. And these are young people starting their academic careers. And then you go to them and say, and then you have to manage a big team and know how to manage your time and know how to do this and how to do that. And then they have to take a bus, and they have to apply for a bus for hours in a place that is very violent like Brazil, and they don't have enough money to have a computer. And then they go to a university that doesn't have a good internet connection. And then they have to deal with a different language that they don't have a good, I forgot the word right now, but it's not domain, I forgot, I'm translating right from Portuguese right now. So, but that's what I'm wanting to illustrate. Even for myself, when I'm not in a good day and my brain is completely fried, I switch words from Portuguese to English because I'm not a native English speaker. And so that curve, when we choose to say, when I go to a colleague in Brazil and say, let's do international science, people come to me and say, I wish, but it's really hard for me to do that in English. And I believe them, because it is really hard. So I mean, I just wanted to say, I agree, but I think we should really, it's really, really hard to do the base work to make it possible and easy until we get to the other, to get to the other steps.
I think that's really true, and I'm gonna let you talk. I'm gonna Kanye West it a little bit. I'm gonna let you talk, Flavio, but I think there's like levels of difficulty. Like I've had students, and I think Natalia has had this issue too, that it's like I just can't continue research because I can't eat. Like it's either I continue school and I don't make any money for myself or my family, or I just need to work. And if you look at the future, you just say, okay, in the near future, I might be able to get a professorship, or I might be able to get like an alternative academic job. But right now, I need to eat, so I can't do that. So I think there are levels of issues. I want to say yes, Natalia, and I will give you time on like Kanye West, Flavio.
And let me just say something about that, is that when you get to senior professors, just real quick, Flavio, is even for them in Brazil, for example, I always talk about, because it's my experience, but it's like we feel ashamed when we make those mistakes. So you have seniors giving talks, even when we are at the top of our profession, and we go to the conferences and we give talks in English, and then we make silly mistakes in English. And we feel like it's our fault because we don't speak good English, and then we feel ashamed because we are not good enough. And then I have to deal with young students, and I see young people from the US, for example, they are managing large teams in their PhDs or before their PhDs, and I can't demand the same from my students. And I don't know, I mean, I'm just saying it's really hard, and we are struggling, and sometimes I have to balance between being the person in Brazil. I love open science. These days, I'm in the person. I'm again being the person outside the bubble, and I'm struggle between being that person saying, "Yay, open science is cool, let's do it," and being that person doing science is so hard. And why we should keep trying to do it? I mean, international science. I mean, when people come to me and say, "Why we keep trying to publish in English?" and I'm like, "You're right. We just should stop. Why are we doing this?" Anyway.
Yeah, Brian, go ahead. I think we're not going to let Flavio talk.
Yeah, that's my goal here, is to just have him sit there the whole time. Going, I want to. Natalia raises such important points on this, and it is. I think it's often so easy to overlook what are fundamentally the practical challenges of engaging in open science or science more generally, based on whatever one has in their cultural or individual context, that are constraints that add just additional barriers to the process. And just one example of this, when we were early in developing the open science framework, we said, well, it's free, it's available to everybody. So of course this is going to be a democratizer, because now anybody can use it. And the Hewlett Foundation gave us a small grant, a planning grant, to say, well, why don't you actually do some on-the-ground research with African researchers to find out how they might use the OSF. And what we learned in doing that, which we just had not, because of our own perspectives, anticipated appropriately, was most of them said, oh, that looks awesome, but my internet connection isn't reliable enough to use it. Well, okay, we built this thing, it's free, anybody can use it, right? And just the lack of appreciation for the context meant that it wasn't fit for purpose. So I think that, as just an example lesson, is something that we have to embrace when we are actively trying to promote inclusion, which is the projects, big team science or otherwise, have to be user-centered. And what I mean by that is, if one is an organizer or promoter of this work, it can't be just, oh, here's the thing that I want to accomplish. It's, how can I understand the potential contributors to this, what their needs and constraints are, and how we might design the project to fit those constraints, and to provide for a collaborative method so that the users can say, you know what, I'm going to get value out of this. Natalia's example of language. Yeah, I feel less comfortable in English. I still want to publish in English journals. If the collaboration could help me solve for that, increase my capacity for English, but also give me access to good collaborators that are also providing that backup, so I have more confidence, then maybe that's a project that provides a little more value for me, and I can focus on my analytic skills and the other things that I bring to the table, and not be limited by the language barrier or otherwise. Okay, now Flavio.
I want to make just two small points. They are both tangential to this, to what is being discussed. But first and foremost is that is on representation, the idea of representation. And it's the first time in my life, and I'm trying academia for some time now, that I'm on a panel with two people from Latin America. It never happened before. And in this case, a fellow Brazilian, an awesome fellow Brazilian. And there's even Nadia, who's organizing everything, but I just want to thank ABRIR for this amazing event and this experience as well. And the second thing, answering the original question, or I don't know, thinking of the consequences of being here, of this position that Natalia, Brian, and I are in. And piggybacking on what Professor Hakeem Jefferson said the other day on Twitter, is that, you know, I grew up on a household where there wasn't safety or security or financial possibilities, and went to had to leave my bus once because it was being shot, and we took over on the back of the bus. And might be crazy, like, oh my God, this is not, this was frequent. If you were in Rio and you had to go to this university in Rio, the Federal University in Rio de Janeiro, which went through a very violent due to inequality issues, and it's overcoming all these steps and making the choice always for academia that makes this, the people with these conditions never arrive here. So it's amazing to be with Natalia here as well, and Nadia, and have this as all. And it's such a privilege to be here to talk about these issues of equity, diversity, inclusion, but also about power, right? Who holds power? Power to do things, to do it better, to set the norms for the field moving forward. And it's a responsibility that sometimes bears too heavy on our shoulders, I am sure. But with Hewlett's grant and with OSF doing its amazing things at ABRIR and other organizations like Fort, we're trying, and little by little, I think we might be doing something that will be consequential for folks down the line when it comes to including them, including the Global South, not only on the language part, but being able to pay folks to participate, being able to give them opportunities of exchange, training, sharing, producing materials. I think all these things are super important.
There was another question from one of the students, and I thought that was really good. It might be more of a question for Flavio or for Natalia, but would love to hear Brian's input as well. There was a really good paper by Sandra Sangoni, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, about open science in Latin America, Southeast Asia, in Africa, and how we need to take other perspectives. And that's where my student, his name is Jose Alfredo Flores, from one of my classes, social sciences PhD classes. And his question was more, what recommendations would you make? He asked about Latin America, but I think this could be for other low and middle income countries in general, for implementing big team science, considering the applicable regulations or standards. Or what we have discussed before was about there's already problems with plagiarism and using other people's data without consent. And so things like data sharing, which is a big part of open science, and authorship, a lot of authors, how do we deal with that with different perspectives? And it might be from Latin America because it's the perspectives that we have down here, and we would love to hear from everybody else. But how do we deal with that? And maybe it's just, we start with this conversation and then start moving on from there.
All right, so I think that thanks for the question, Nadia, because I talked about this in my presentation, so that is easy. Thank you. So I think that it starts with a lot of effort on the part of the Global North due to its privilege. I think it makes sense that if somebody has to reach out, it has to come from somewhere, and I think that it would be a more of an ethical responsibility that the privileged do so. That is the premise, and I hope that makes sense, but I would be glad to argue in favor of that. In any case, I think we need to provide the resources that are necessary to folks to be able to concentrate on training or reading materials and etc. So funding that essentially incentivizes, the sharing of know-how, the sharing of all the knowledge that you need to have in order to collaborate in big team science projects, and have some sort of incentive that we are able to provide to them that is more than just academic, right? Because the Global South, sure, academic is everything, like a line on our CV is our currency. But it's only a currency insofar you can eat, insofar you can pay for your family, insofar, there are not extenuating circumstances on health, on disability, and so forth. So I think that being able to provide at least a financial incentive is something that we should do moving forward. Having all our materials open, having an amazing, as Brian said, organization behind the scenes with a lot of documentation that is easy and people can access in different ways depending on their bandwidth, is also an important part for sure. So not at all devaluing that. On the contrary, we can only have this conversation moving forward to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility because these infrastructures are there today. So by no means, that's a necessity for sure. And in addition to incentive, it would be great if the Global North or researchers in the Global North could start thinking about, especially the folks that are most accomplished and that they are in a privileged position that they can also give a little bit, is to share credit or academic credit in different ways with folks from the Global South. I think that we often forget that if you are worried about, not only worried, if it takes 3 hours for you to arrive at your university in order for you to have a stable connection with the Global North, and 3 hours back, and you have to work on top of your job, because I never met a Brazilian that didn't work on top of the university. There are a few, sure, but the general person going to a federal university. And there's so many worries that we need to do more, and sharing credit, and by that I mean authorship order, or I mean looping folks into projects that require different types of contribution and expertise. I think this is a good way forward for us, at least 2 steps, right? Funding and sharing credit that we can easily do in a way, I hope.
Anybody else? Natalia, do you want to add something, or Brian?
Natalia, you first.
No, I agree with Flavio. It's surprisingly common to get this question when you talk about open science. And I always say, at least it's my view, I may be naive, but I think it's more difficult to get your idea stolen when you share stuff, especially in repositories where you can get a DOI, and because if someone do it, you will actually have a proof that you posted that, and then of course it's unpleasant, but you can prove that it was your thing that the person stole. And it's much worse than to have your data stolen in other ways, when you actually, it's much more difficult to prove that happened. So when you share a preprint and you share data materials, etc., you have a register, a record, a public record that those things are yours. But I'm very impressed but how people are afraid of sharing credit with others in papers. So I've been talking about credits, the credit taxonomy for a while now, and it's very interesting how some academics rationalize, I don't know, they kind of argue that it's like, I don't think some people are that interested in having their names in the paper. And the politics of authorship is very interesting to me, because in the end, attributing credit to those that contributed to a project is the best way to avoid the whole politics of authorship that we have, the whole issue that we have nowadays with authorship in publications, in my opinion. So yeah, I agree with Flavio. Giving credit and giving funding are the best ways to help us and to help people from under-resourced research communities.
I thought both Flavio and Natalia's comments are excellent because this is a complex issue. And what I particularly liked is the communication of the sense everybody has ownership in this. So it isn't for them to solve, or I'm totally willing. It's somebody else has to act. Everybody has a role to play in trying to increase equity, trying to improve inclusion, trying to maximize the potential for everybody to seize opportunities and to develop capacities in contributing to science. And big team science certainly offers some new and unique pathways for that, particularly thinking globally and redistribution of resources in spirit or in actual practice. The question of how one gets involved and what one does, I think really is rooted, starting with asking oneself, what are my goals? Why do I want to do this? Because everyone has resource constraints in one way or another. And so thinking very concretely about what is it that I would like to get out of this, right? I want to get involved in this big team science because I don't have access to the training locally to really understand this kind of methodology. So I think that if I join a big team science project, I can actually build those skills by being involved with other researchers who have been doing this in other places. I'm just throwing out one example. But by articulating that concretely, I think it can focalize to use our limited resources in the ways that are most likely to give us the opportunities that we're looking for, whether we are the ones redistributing resources and giving hands up, or the ones that are seizing opportunities so that we can lift up ourselves and our own skills and contributions. That it's hard because resources are limited, and so that does have some impacts on how one explores and selects opportunities or creates those opportunities themselves.
Does anybody, I feel like it's been me and my students asking questions. I don't know if anybody else has questions or comments or suggestions about how do we deal? I think we could do this for like 5 years and still be like trying to come up with solutions to all of these things. It's a multi-pronged problem, so it's a multi-pronged solution that we're gonna need to do. Including like all of the things that all of you have said about motivating people and making it mandatory at a certain sense, but also like talking about social justice and inclusion and diversity, but also making the science work for the people. And I think that's one of the things that that I think we need to push for more. Flavio and I have been working on a paper about like applied science in Latin America, like this whole dichotomy of applied and basic science, which is, and I've tried to get Natalia to help us out too, and we're working on it. And one of the things that happens a lot too is this dichotomy, which is also filled with like problems of like justice, of like who does applied science and who does basic science, and what is thought to be good science and have good internal validity versus good external or validity. And so I think that's one of the things that we need to start looking into as well. Like, what type of science do we need to make so that it helps low and middle income countries too? And how do we return all of these things that we're trying to do to the people and to the researchers and to the countries that we're trying to do it for, which is, I think, a point that Natalia brought up pretty well. Yes, Brian.
Yeah, I love this point that you raised. And, I think one of the critical elements of it that you were saying is that we'll never be done with this. It is huge. It is global and has national actors that are a few levels of power up from any of us that are driving the economies of nations and everything else that's happening that sustains some of these inequities. And yet, that doesn't make us powerless individually and collectively to say, not just someone should do something, but we can do something. And that's, to me, what is the greatest strength of the big team science movement. And this conference is a perfect embodiment of that discussion, which is, it isn't just fish shaking, someone should do something. It's here we are, we're doing something. And yeah, we can do it better, and we want to trade ideas, and we want to figure out how to improve these pathways, but we're doing it in an action orientation rather than in a conceptual hope that somebody will change the system. We are the change, and so we got to get up and see what we can do. Yeah, power to the people. Here we go.
For sure.
I wanted. Oh yeah, Flavio, sorry.
You sure?
No, Joe, just go. I wanted to actually promote the other session. So once you finish, I'll do it. Like pick up from.
So I'll just say quickly. I think that the moral obligation or the ethical obligation that we have to think about, and I think it's a good parallel for me to understand how privileged I am, but also making parallels with existing problems that we have in society. So think of racism that embeds our institutions and society at large. And it's an idea that I have while recording this talk for ABRIR, and I really love any feedback that you have on it. But I thought that one of the ways to look at the moral argument would be to make comparisons with colonialism practices. To what extent is the global north extracting a resource that only the global south can give, in this case, participants for research, generalizability, replicability, analysts? To what extent are we taking advantage of that resource without sharing with them the spoils or the benefits or the the prizes, the awards with them, right? So it seems extractivist to me that a lot of folks from the global north are, not only using global north companies, so without distributing the money whenever they're collaborating data, but also not sharing the credit in a way that is relative to the effort that it is to find how many people that there is, or that, it's not the same me sending an email to Lucid or YouGov or whatever company than folks going on the ground and printing and coding answers on paper sheets, etc. And even the opportunities that folks at the global north have been given versus the opportunities that people in the global south are given. So in this sense, maybe this is not a good comparison. Maybe this is completely misguided. I'm completely open to feedback via email, of course, about this, if this is wrong. But to me, initially, it made sense to think of exploitation of researchers' work and labor and effort and intellectual contribution, and exploitation of participants. And what makes me a little sad about all of this is that we're doing this in the name of science without being critical, right? So we're like, oh, we want higher generalizability, we want higher replicability, and we are all framing this for the best of science, and it is. By all means, it is. We're not talking about bad or good intentions here, but to what extent, in the name of science, are we perpetuating colonialist or exploitative practices? So I think that I would be happy to hear about this in other sessions, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I think it's something that you brought up in your talk, and I think panel or whatever, your video. I think it's even if you get credit on the paper, it may not be enough for all the effort that you put into. And so even if we appear in a 400 author paper and you're author 258, that's not going to feed you, or it's not going to help you advance at a certain extent. There's things that are coming out in each of our countries. For example, in Mexico, there's like authorship, if it's in consortium, it doesn't count. So like I put all this effort into a paper, or a student put all this effort into a paper, and they're not getting the credit that should count. And again, it should be a multi-pronged solution of like change needs to come within us and our institutions. It needs to come from the publishing companies, but also from our governments. And we all need to be pushing elsewhere. And kind of coming back to what Brian is saying is very, very, very Kennedy of us, of like, ask not what open science can do for you, but what you can do for open science, of like put in our little pebble of work so that we can start making this better for everybody and for all.
People who are in the live stream can't see us in the chat, so that's why sometimes we smile. And so I think it's important for those who are maybe not aware of that. One of the points of ABRI and the workshop series is to investigate the barriers that people like us, or not so like us, maybe not as much like us, they face, so which barriers they face, so we can actually take more concrete steps. And then we tried to translate the survey to a few languages, and we'll have sessions that our original purpose from the beginning was to have some concrete goal at the end. So we'll try to come up with at least one project at the end, that's a research project that will be submitted for funding, and for at least some intellectual or material infrastructure, for example, through PSA, the Psychological Science Accelerator, that should be led by underrepresented researchers. We are using the underrepresented term because it doesn't need to be someone from a low and middle income country, for example, but because we know that this is a much more complex issue, the issue of representation in science, and that's why we came up with this idea. We hope we'll be successful in that. We had 3 hackathons to do that, and we are partners with Forge, represented here by Flavio, and the PSA. There are a lot of PSA members, including the founder himself will be in our event, Chris Chartier. And we hope the CEO, the Center for Open Science will join us eventually as well. I'm just saying here, just throwing out that. And no pressure. And so we hope we'll come up with something, some seeds of what may be proof of concept that this can be a way forward to a more representative big team science. Of course, there are other examples, and we'll be talking about them throughout the event as well. Some solutions, and no, we are not only. It's not only complaining, so people won't just think that we're only here just to talk about colonization and all the issues and how we are upset and angry, and because we are, but it's not only that.
I think one of the things is that's really important that Natalia is bringing up is that there's lots of barriers, and one of the barriers could be because I think we saw the Center for Open Sciences called for one of the projects, and I think a lot of the things that also happens, at least in Latin America, is that a lot of Latin American universities are very like teaching heavy. So our workload is super huge. And so putting together a grant is just sometimes even impossible to try to do. Apart from like, oh, I'm never going to get it, so I'm never going to try for it. When we tried out this, again, I want to thank SIPS for the grant that we got. Next time we're going to ask for more money. We put a lot of work and a lot of effort into this, and we're like, oh my God, we should have asked for double. But anyways, so I think that's one barrier. And sometimes you think like, I'm never going to get it. And we thought about it too. So it's like slowly, ABRIR is trying to like slowly think of the barriers that we can encounter, and then start to slowly take them down. Of like the shyness, or I'm not good enough, or the imposter syndrome, or I don't have the tools, or it's not necessarily in my language, or I don't have the time. So if we can do it in a team, just like many things that we can start slowly taking the barriers down. Also want to say a shout out to Heidi that's here from the many babies here. Thank you also for being here. We also want to collaborate with you, and hopefully we can move forward here. Go ahead, Natalia. And I think we have like maybe 5 more minutes if we want to say anything at the end, and to get going.
Forgot to plug in our survey. We are conducting a survey during our meeting and afterwards about the barriers for underrepresented researchers, and we hope to present our results at the BTS conference. It's not the bench, it's the Big Team Science Conference. I was hoping to make that joke sometime. Yeah.
So thank you again, Brian, Flavio, Natalia, for being here, taking more time than that was intended to be here. I'm super excited. I was super anxious, super nervous. This made me like kind of helped me out a lot. I'm more excited now. I'm more pumped. My poor students and all, like, if you see Slack, it's me like 20 messages, and then like 10 messages of Alma, and like Aisha and Natalia being like, you guys are crazy. Why are you chatting so much? And so hopefully I won't be too much in the next few days about how excited I am. To a way forward, and let's all try to do as much as we can with as however much as we can. Again, thank you all, and thank you all the students here that made everything possible. There's like 10 students that have been there the whole time, like internet issues and connectivity issues and like the millions of things that could have gone wrong. They all helped us make it go okay. Well, so thank you all, and hopefully we can continue to do this for many, many, many more years.
Thank you, everyone, for doing this work and for letting me be part of it. Super exciting to see this happening.
Thank you for being here. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, ABRIR, especially. Amazing event. Everything, representation warms our hearts. Thank you. It's a unique event.
See you in the next session.
Thank you.